machine gives you professional finishes to your hems, but it can do a lot more than that. It has up to 3 needles, so you can get those lovely parallel lines of beautifully even stitches. And it's used a lot with knits, so any kind of stretch fabric from swimwear right the way through to lycra and all kinds of different stretch fabrics. But it's also really useful for sewing with thick fabrics as well. So the stitches it creates are really secure because you have up to 3 rows of stitches which are lovely and parallel on your hems and on your seams. It can also produce some really beautiful decorative stitches, so these can add some really lovely top stitching effects to your garments. It's similar to a point. It has the same looper system, but it only has 1 looper, where an overlocker would have 2 loopers. It also doesn't have a blade, so it doesn't trim your fabric while you're sewing.
You can use your Coverstitch machine for so many things. Now, as Nikki's already mentioned, you can use it for hemming, and that's the thing that most people associate using a cover stitch for. But it actually does a lot more than that. So you know the flat lock seams that you see on your activewear and on leggings and things like that? The Coverstitch does a great job of that, and it allows you to get really flat seams. Especially with 3 needles in use, the amount of stretch that you get in those stitches is even more than you'd get on a serger. So it's really good for lycra and for super stretchy fabrics, especially fabrics that stretch in more than 2 ways. It can allow you to get a really professional finish, especially on things like neckbands or hems or cuffs. It also has a really cool chain stitching function, which is done with just 1 needle, but the great thing about that is you can unravel it in seconds from one end to the other. So it's really good for basting garments together. You can just try on the fit, and if it's not quite right, you can just pull away the stitches in seconds. No need for a seam ripper.
It's really easy and it's really fun.
Really fun.
I think once your sewing gets to the level that you're looking for that professional finish, so you've got the insides all looking lovely, but you're looking to improve your hems and improve your neckbands and improve basically your sewing with jerseys and with knits. Also, if you're looking to make activewear, lingerie, anything with lycra, then it's really useful for that as well.
Well, it's quite simple. There isn't nearly as much variety as you would get when choosing a sewing machine or an overlocker. But there are a couple of different types. So at the budget end, you might get a Coverstitch machine that just has 2 needles. Then moving up from that, you'd get a machine that has 3 needles. There's also a type of machine called a top cover, which is slightly different because the loop or grid system that you see on the reverse of your stitches on a Coverstitch machine, a top cover will produce on the top as well. So it's loops both top and bottom. Finally, you can get a combo machine, which is a hybrid of the 2. So it's mainly a serger, but it also has Coverstitch functionality, and you can switch between the 2. But there are pros and cons to having one of those.
The good side of one of those machines is that you only have 1 machine and it does everything for you. So if you've got limited amount of space and also limited amount of budget to be able to afford 1 machine instead of 2, then you should consider that. The cons for it are that it is quite tricky and fiddly sometimes to switch between the 2 functionalities.
Now, as you know, our classes are sponsored by Janome, so obviously we're going to recommend their machines, and they are fantastic. They have 3 different Coverstitch machines to choose from. But there are lots of other brands that also sell Coverstitch machines, such as Elna, Brother, Juki, Singer, and Babylock. So you'll want to go and have a look at all the different brands available. Perhaps the brand that you're already using as a sewing machine or a serger might mean that you're used to the layout of those types of machines, and it might be safer to stick with the same brand, or perhaps you fancy trying something new. With all major purchases, you probably want to spend the most that you can. So whatever your budget, you want to try and get the best machine that you can fit in that budget. Some people think that you should start off with a basic machine and you can always upgrade later when you grow out of it. But we think it's safer to just get the best machine that you can. It might be a slightly steeper learning curve at the beginning, but then you're not going to grow out of it quite so quickly. obviously buying a new machine means that it's going to come with a warranty, and that's going to give you some peace of mind. There's no reason at all why you couldn't go and find a second-hand Coverstitch machine, and there is an argument to say that if you can't afford a particularly top model from a new machine, maybe you could afford a slightly better model if it was second-hand. But the thing to always remember if you're considering a second-hand machine is that you should factor in the cost of a service. Let somebody give it a good going over and make sure that it's in tip-top condition before you start trying to figure out how to use it. Lots of showrooms will have multiple Coverstitch machines that you can go and get somebody to show you how to use, and you can try different brands and different models, and you can see what's a good fit for you. So go online and have a look for your local dealers and see if there's an appointment that you can arrange to go and have a little play before you make your decision. One of the things we think is important is how much space you've got actually on the flatbed. So both to the left of the needle, so you've got somewhere to actually run your fabric along, but also more importantly to the right of the needle, so the space that you've actually got to feed things through. Unlike with a serger or an overlocker, you're stitching right on the edge of the fabric all the time. But with a Coverstitch, you can sew on top of your seams, you can sew in different directions, much more like a sewing machine. The other thing to consider is how many threads you're going to need. Or how many needles, more importantly. So if a 2-needle machine is going to be perfect for you and you're never going to need to do a flat lock or need to do anything that involves 3 needles, then a 2-needle machine will save you some money, and maybe that's the way for you to go. But if you think that having the 3-needle functionality is going to be useful either now or in the future, then it's definitely worth investing in a 3-needle straight away. Another thing to consider is whether the machine has a free arm. They don't all have a removable free arm, and obviously that means that when it comes to cuffs and circular seams, you're able to feed that in the round, and that can make sewing over seams a lot easier. Another thing to consider when you're buying a Coverstitch machine is threading. How easy is it going to be to thread? Now think about the fact that you're either hemming or you're flat locking predominantly with this machine, which means that you're going to have visible threads all the time. So you want to make sure that you can switch it out to the right colour for your project. So how quickly you can thread it is going to be really important. So look for something that has easy threading. So on this Janome, there's a button that you press that releases the looper, which allows you to thread it really easily. So look for those kind of functions on the machine to make it easier for you. A final feature that you might want to look for is whether the machine has adjustable presser foot pressure. I always have to say that slowly.
Really slowly.
Adjusting the presser foot pressure is going to affect how tightly the fabric is being clamped, and on some very stretchy knit fabrics this is going to help you to avoid wavy seams. Now most Coverstitch machines should also come with a differential feed button that will allow you to adjust for those kind of things as well, but having both on the machine gives you the most options available. In the next few lessons, we're going to take you from the basics right through to more advanced techniques. So starting with the anatomy of the machine, we're going to show you what everything is and what it's for.
Then we're going to take you through the different stitches using 1, 2 or 3 needles to get different effects.
And then we'll look at those stitches in more detail and we'll troubleshoot some of the issues regarding tension and differential feed and some of the things that you'll need to be aware of.
Then we're going to look at the different types of threads you can use in the Coverstitch machine. It's not just the basic cones, you can do fancy stuff too.
We'll also walk you through some of the everyday applications for using the Coverstitch machine. So we'll look at some dressmaking scenarios and show you what kind of stitch you'd want to use.
And then finally we've got some attachments. So Coverstitch machines come with some extra bits that you can purchase, and we're going to have a look at them and see what that can add to your sewing.
So as you all agree, there's a lot to cover, so make yourself a strong cup of tea and let's get started.